start, members, just remind members of the electronic devices. Brief overview of today's.
They're sorting out the sound just.
It's very echoey. Brief overview of today's business. The committee will consider a proposal to make a statutory rule relating to public interest disclosure. Colleges NI will brief the committee on the review of the industrial relations framework and further education colleges. A departmental briefing on the Disability Employment Service strategic review, and a departmental briefing on the proposed consultation on conduct of employment agencies and employment business regulations. Members, apologies from David McClarty, Pat Ramsey and Alistair Ross.
Phil Flanagan.
And Phil Flanagan. Any other apologies? Okay, members, moving on to chairperson's business. Just to advise members that I met with Seamus Walsh of Dungannon Rotary on the 26th of February regarding the Rotary Club Technology Tournament. It was actually very good, and members, we have sort of progressed and would just like the committee to host a similar event in the Long Gallery in the autumn, to ask the Committee for Education to go host the event as well. So it was very worthwhile. Members agreed. Okay. Just also advise members who were not able to attend that last week the committee visited Glenveigh Special School in Ussel. The visits were very useful in providing the evidence to the inquiry and the post-19 SEM provision, and there are short reports for both visits on page 5 and page 7. Members content? Just content that we add the reports actually to the inquiry. Agreed? Okay, just advise members...
Sorry, Chair, see, just on that, but I found that both visits are fairly interesting. Obviously, they're two quite different provisions, but there were a number of issues that were raised during the likes of the AV thing that I think obviously will be beneficial. But see, when we have other officials or other thing, even if we can take some of the main pointers out of the AV, and just note some of the main AV, we take some of the main points out of it and actually use that as some probing questions to try and
pull officials. Yeah. No, certainly, Phil. Good point. Yep. Members content. Members, just advise that due to an extra plenary session next Wednesday, in regard to RPA, we had planned visits to Appleby Trust and Sperrinview Special School. These will have to be rescheduled till after Easter. There's a date.
14th of May.
14th of May. But can I just point out to members that the two visits, it will be a full day, just to allow a full day.
Armand and Dungannon.
Aye, Armand and Dungannon, that'd be Roman's side of things.
Just hope there's nothing on OFM, DFM that day.
You'd be alright for a day. I'll speak to Mike for you. Okay, members. Members, we content to still visit Appleby Trust and Sperrinview, even though we do have to reschedule because of the sitting. Okay, just for that, as contended, our sort of schedule will be to 10 to 12 in Appleby, and then Sperrinview for lunch, and then a turn discussion with the staff afterwards. Because I think what we did find in Glenveigh, some of the topics were being raised. We did want, we're better spending time now at this stage and getting the face-to-face interaction, that we maybe won't get from a written response. Okay, members, also it was raised last week, or one of our visits, that it may be worthwhile visiting Springvale Training Centre as part of the inquiry as well. Members content? We had that. Okay, thank you. Okay, members, just moving on then. Tabled at page 3 are the different options really on how we're going to manage this inquiry, because I think when we have agreed their terms of reference now, it is extending into quite a piece of work. And Kathy, do you want to?
Sure. Can I find it? Right. Okay, there's different options. The first option 1 is traditional committee meeting, taking evidence each week, which goes on for a long time. And we're trying to do this a bit more inventive and different, and try and do it in a quicker pace, so it doesn't take a year to do the inquiry as such. So if you look at option 2, that's what we're thinking of. It would be evidence events out and about Northern Ireland. It depends how many submissions we get, how many events we need to have, and it would be like stakeholder events where we would have 1-2 tables per object, each objective in the terms of reference. and then we would have a note taker at each table, and they would take notes and they would focus the table into just concentrating on that one objective. And then we would do a plenary at the end, which we would Hansard there to record it, and we would have the note taker at each table then reading into the report what the conclusions are of that table. So we try and group people together by, maybe it would be by parents, maybe it be people with learning disabilities, maybe it be people from schools. We just have to wait and see who we get submissions from. And the intention is then that to aid us in doing that as such, if you look at option 3, contracting a special advisor, the Assembly have already an agreement with the universities here to call off experts, and they would charge us £200 per day. The intention is really then that we should get a special advisor, use this contract that they have with the universities and get a special advisor in to advise us, and we would pull together different bits of the submissions, etc. They would give us advice on how we should do it. So that's my attention for option 2 and option 3. If you are agreeable to that, it means we can start to think about it and organise it. Once the closing date comes, the closing date for the submissions is the 21st of March. So once we have that, we'll know exactly who we're getting, how many submissions we're getting, etc.
Okay.
To see just on it, and it was just saying to Bronwyn there, one of the things that came through again at Avey is the whole question of how a person is statemented. Is there part of it that we can actually get people in that just to explain to us how this whole process works, the length of time that it takes? It was raised last week at the Avey.
We can ask it as an education and health through statement, but we can
Education
definitely
do
ask
point
because
at school.
it is an important starting point, I think,
Could
for
we
the
get
whole.
a research paper?
It's in the research. There's a research paper in the pack,
I saw the paper.
and it's in it explaining how statementing works and how it's done by Department of Education up to the age that they go to school, and then it's taken over by health after that.
Sometimes it just doesn't work the way that it's laid out, and I think that's one of the things that we had last week also.
If you have a look at the research paper and see whether that's
No problem.
sufficient,
Yeah.
we're coming to that anyway.
Right, yeah. Members, just in regard of how we take forward the inquiry, are you content? I know my preferred option would be option 2, doing it that wee bit different rather than just evidence sessions.
Sounds good.
Looks good.
Content enough? And the special advisor as well, just to be
Yeah.
go forward with that.
And then option 4 is a survey, but I think we can wait. We did a monkey survey when we did the careers inquiry, but I think we can wait and see whether we need it later on. And again, we can talk to the special advisor about that, about what sort of questions we would ask if we're going to do a monkey survey. And
Survey
then,
monkey.
or survey monkey, yeah. And then option 5 is study visits. I received on Tuesday from the researcher a research paper on international best practice on it. So just jumping the gun, but if I go ahead, we have a paper on what happens here in Northern Ireland on research what happens now in Northern Ireland for SEN. We've got this paper in international best practice. My suggestion is at our next committee meeting on the 26th of March, we get Owen, the researcher, to come along and talk to both papers and explain them both to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So we can talk about study visits then whenever he talks through the paper.
Bronwyn.
I also suggest as well, I know the Aspire group was up here giving evidence, and it'd be,
Spar.
well, the post-19 special educational group
Right,
from
yeah.
Spermview, if you recall.
Yes.
And, you know, if people, you know, maybe the committee should actually go through that paper again just to refresh themselves, and then maybe come prepared with questions to ask us Spermview.
Yeah,
You know,
aye,
as
so we're
well, I think
prepared for
that's
the visit.
useful to
Yeah.
give us a heads up.
It's in that
It's
new,
in-
it's in the SharePoint,
Yeah.
in there
It's in the
now
inquiry
for you,
pack.
Yeah.
in the inquiry
Do I
pack.
have it, and I'll be across the detail of it, but just for other
Other
members,
members
it'd
to
be
be
useful.
That would be a good idea, yes.
We'll issue it again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, members, minutes of our last meeting, the draft minutes are at page 11 of your packs. That's the draft minutes of the meeting on the 26th of February. Minutes members, you content that those are a true record of that meeting? If so, I'll sign them as being correct. Members, then, matters arising, just at page 19 is the agreed action points from the last committee meeting. Members content? Okay, thank you, members. Just members, at page 25 is the departmental response to the committee's query regarding the tracking system for those not in education, employment or training. Just remind members that at this meeting on the 12th of February, the committee received a departmental briefing on the review of youth training, and officials agreed to provide details of how those who are most marginalised and disadvantaged, including those who leave care, are tracked as part of the NEET strategy. Members, the committee agreed at its meeting the 26th of February to put this correspondence in the pack for today's meeting. Members, any comments on that? Okay, content to note. Okay, members, moving on to correspondence. Well, quite a lot of correspondence in the packs at the minute. From page 30 and also tabled, members, at page 44 is the departmental response regarding level 3 training in coded welding. Members, content to note. Okay, members, page 40 is the correspondence from the ICTU seeking to brief the committee on 2-pay regulations. Members, do you want to add this as a briefing? Want to get a schedule in the forward work programme? Yes, Brad?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Okay, members. Members, at page 63 is the Research Information Service briefing paper in the post-secondary school provision for people with special educational needs in Northern Ireland. And Cathy's already touched on this about getting no one up to brief us, so we're agreed on that. Members, page 202 is the response from Queen's University Belfast regarding the advertisements of jobs within the Students' Union at Queen's and whether it contravenes the Education Act 1994. The response is there, members, for those who raised it that day. The Students' Union officials are actually considered employees of the university. Any further? Okay, members, content. Members, then tabled papers at page 8 is the departmental response regarding whether a disparity exists between Northern Ireland and the rest of UK, which prevents technology teachers in the rest of the UK from teaching in Northern Ireland. Tom, that was the point you raised at the end of I think it was their last meeting here. And I think there are, page 9 there, Annex A gives the 3 possibilities. Might have a look at that, maybe come back to our next meeting if there's any queries on it, or...
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll take a look at it and come back again. It's just the fact being that teachers coming over from England couldn't teach here because they required this qualification, and there was nowhere here for them to do this the qualification that was needed. We'll look at this response that we have, and sure, we can bring it back next week if we're not satisfied with it.
No problem. Okay, members, just to draw your attention, there's 4 invitations. Page 203 is an invitation from Queen's University Belfast to attend a lecture by Professor Anthony Murphy for the Department of Economics. It's 31st of March, half 5 in the Riddle Hall, Stranmillis, Belfast. Members, if you are intending to go to that, can you let the committee staff know? Members, page 204 is an invitation from the Commissioner for Older People, Northern Ireland, to attend a breakfast meeting on valuing an ageing workforce in room 115 Parliament Buildings on Wednesday the 26th of March at 8:30 a.m. Members, that is before or prior to one of our committee meetings, and I've been asked to co-host as chair of the committee, so it might be worthwhile if anybody, I think it starts with a cooked breakfast, so it's be better than the fruit and scones if you just want to go. Okay, members, then an invitation at page 11 is an invitation from Colleges NI to hold its meeting at the annual Best Awards event on Wednesday the 28th of May in Tullyglass House Hotel, Ballymena. And members who have been involved with Colleges NI are actually funding the committee going there, so it's not coming out of our...
What date's it?
Wednesday the 28th of May. Members content that we hold their meeting there on that day. Yep. Great part of the country. Members, tabled at page 14 is an invitation from the Irish Congress of Trade Unions Northern Ireland Committee for the Chair to attend a seminar on public procurement and tackling social disadvantage on the 8th of April at 5:30 in the Stormont Hotel, Belfast. Just to let you know, members, I intend to attend that, depending on
Jared, let's get back to what this start from what was raised here. Do you remember the whole thing about procurement and a number of groups that had contacted us because they were out of the loop when it came to decisions? So there's going to be our own finance minister and the finance minister from
Wales.
Wales.
I think it is.
Good.
I think it's Wales.
It is.
Yeah.
Yep, Wales.
The members, it could be an interesting event to attend. If you are intending to attend, if you let the clerk know.
What date is it?
8th of April.
8th of April, 5:30 down the Stormont Hotel. It's a Tuesday
5:30?
for
5:30.
5:30. Okay, members, draft forward work programme is at page 206. The draft forward work programme is there until the 23rd of April. We may add other briefings maybe scheduled as they arise. Members agreed?
Great.
Okay, just advise members that briefings by Stranmallison and St Mary's Teachers College on the review of teacher training infrastructure has been scheduled for the 4th of June 2014. Should members just to be aware that's already in the forward work programme. Also, members tabled at page 16 is the departmental correspondence advising that the contracting process for Steps to Success has slipped, and they are seeking to postpone the briefing planned for the 9th of April until after Easter recess. Members, I think we're fully aware of this procurement process and what's going on in it, and I think if the procurement process has slipped, there's no point in bringing them in while they're still in the middle of that process. Members are agreed we reschedule until it's completed. Okay, agreed. Okay, members, moving on then. Agenda item 7 is the statutory rule 2014-48, the Public Interest Disclosure Prescribed Persons Amendment Order for Northern Ireland 2014. Members, it's at page 207 of your packs. The Department has laid a statutory rule on the 4th of March. The Public Interest Disclosure Order in Northern Ireland 1998 gives protection to whistleblowers who raise concerns by making a protected disclosure about dangerous or illegal activity. The proposed amendment will bring a range of bodies under the legislation and will update the description of subject matter about which a disclosure may be made. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution. The committee has considered the proposal to make the statutory rule at its meeting on the 12th of February and agreed that it was content with the proposed statutory rule. There have been no change to the policy content since the proposal was submitted, and the examiner statutory rules has at no points to raise on this rule. Members, are you content with the rule?
Yep.
Okay, members, in that regard, that the Committee for Employment and Learning has considered SR 2014-48, the Public Interest Disclosure Prescribed Persons Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2014, and has no objection to the rule. Okay, members, moving on then to our first briefing from this morning. Papers are page 226 of your packs, and it's a briefing from Colleges NI on the review of industrial relations framework on further education colleges in Northern Ireland. And could I just welcome along Gerard Campbell, Chief Executive of Colleges NI, Trevor Nealon, Acting Chair of Colleges NI, Robert Laverty, Chair of Human Resources Working Group, Colleges NI, and Karen Lennon, the Policy and Public Affairs Managers, Colleges NI. Folks, you are very welcome here this morning. Could I just remind you, you could cut your briefing to about 10 minutes for us. It gives members then a chance to ask questions. But folks, over to you.
Well, okay, well, thank you very much to the committee, first of all, for agreeing to see us on what we think is a very important matter in relation to the future of the further education sector in Northern Ireland. I don't want to spend too much time in the background to this report, because I think the committee would be familiar with some of the circumstances which has led us to where we are currently. There was a feeling for some time that the industrial relations setup in the FE sector could be more effective. And indeed that was reinforced by comments in the McConnell report, which I know that the committee had looked at in the past. And again, the Minister for Employment and Learning, Stephen Farry, had encouraged us to take a step back and look afresh at how effective industrial relations actually was within the sector. And in response to that, the Colleges Northern Ireland Board commissioned Sir Robert Salisbury, who had done some work, in the latest work he had done, I think, was in the question of schools funding. So we picked somebody we felt had some sort of status and would be able to lend a degree of gravitas to the situation. And Sir Robert spent a considerable amount of time with all the stakeholders in the sector. He would have met staff, both unionised staff, non-unionised staff, and focus groups in all of the colleges, and eventually produced a report which had 17 recommendations in it. And the Colleges Northern Ireland Board, after considering the report, accepted the report and the 17 recommendations in their totality. I'd like to pass over to Jerry, who's going to just say a few brief words about the main recommendations. And we're aware, as you said, Chair, that the main purpose of being here is to have some discussion with the committee members. But Jerry, just briefly touch on some of the main recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Trevor, and likewise thank you, Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to come along this morning. We believe this is a very positive opportunity for industrial relations right across the FE sector. The review led by Sir Robert Salisbury is totally transparent, it's independent. There are many lessons to be learned in moving forward that all parties who are involved in industrial relations have a role to play. And I think for the further education sector, the management within the colleges, it's very clear that in moving forward we want to do so in partnership with all our stakeholders, with the trade unions, with all staff within the colleges who are both members of trade unions but also not members of trade unions. And there are challenges in terms of improving communications throughout the colleges, in developing and building transparent relationships with all stakeholders, really with the key aim in mind of improving the very good education and training and technical vocational education which is within the colleges, but also helping to support the colleges in continuing that very positive engagement with business and industry right across Northern Ireland. There were 17 key recommendations. As you will be aware, Chair, the report and its recommendations have been accepted in full by the employers. And I just wanted to pick up very briefly some of the key elements from that in terms of moving forward. We're moving into a new framework which, on the back of Sir Robert Salisbury's proposal, is a single table joint negotiating committee which will have equality right at the centre of that. That will have involvement from all trade union organisations in terms of those who are educational support staff representatives, lecturing support representatives, and also management in terms of FE directors and principals. This will focus clearly on hours, holidays and pay. And really this is about being solutions focused. In the past there have been, particularly within the lecturing negotiating committee side, relationships and the functionality of that committee has been flawed, it's been dysfunctional. Issues have been not resolved, they've been set in the bends, and that has had a negative impact in terms of relations right across the sector. And what this new negotiating framework we would hope will be more solutions focused, where we can actually get issues moving forward. But other areas in terms of consultation, the proposal from Salisbury was to have a joint consultative forum, which would be more wide-ranging as well, and would the challenge out to employers and the colleges is to involve representation from all staff, not only those who are represented by the relevant unions. So again, that's a challenge for colleges. I think that's a challenge is laid down for the trade union organisations as well. But the overall aim is to improve industrial relations right across the piece and to have as wide an involvement of all staff within the colleges. And a key tenet of this is equality, because every member of staff, whether you're a lecturer, whether you're a member of the management team, whether you're a member of the educational support staff, everybody has a very clear and supportive role to play in the overall success of colleges and the FE sector. There's a clear indication in terms of continuing with collective bargaining. There are 6 regional colleges. There's a great strength in the colleges coming together and working collectively. That can help the colleges in terms of the strategic direction that the colleges are going, in terms of improving educational outcomes for our young people and other learners, but also in terms of improving our relationships with business and industry as well. And very clearly, my last point I'll make, Chair, is that in terms of moving forward and doing this, we're going to listen to other stakeholders. We met with the trade union organisations last week before the report was officially released. We have indicated that we will be developing a task force, which is one of the key recommendations from the Salisbury report. That task force will have representation right across the colleges, representation from trade unions, from the Department for Employment and Learning, but also from non-unionised members as well. This is something which will then hold to account all the key players in terms of developing the implementation plan for the 17 recommendations. Industrial relations has been challenging across the sector the last number of years. We make no Everybody's aware of the issues. We do see this as an opportunity to move forward in a positive environment. There will be challenges, but I think the Salisbury report gives a platform that we can build on, which can support the colleges in a very good and effective job that they do in providing vocational technical education, but very importantly, supporting colleges in working with employers in that key challenge of rebuilding and rebalancing the economy. So we believe it's a very positive report. There are challenges for all players, but in meeting those challenges, FE can be in a much stronger position moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. I suppose, just asking, I know you said, Jerry, there was an independent report. Who actually commissioned it? Was it Colleges NI?
Colleges NI is the membership organisation for the 6 regional colleges. The board of Colleges NI commissioned the report to be independent, which was where Sir Robert Salisbury came in. The key issue here was we've had the McConnell report, which focused on the North West Regional College over 12 months ago. The Minister had made clear that there are issues in industrial relations that he would like the sector to take charge of and actually go towards solutions. So the fact that we engaged with Sir Robert Salisbury, he, as part of his process, listened to, met and consulted with a very wide range of stakeholders right across the colleges, with all the trade union organisations, with this committee. I know he was in contact with this committee, with the Minister, senior civil servants in Dell, and with other sister organisations across in the United Kingdom. And very clearly our aim was to have as transparent and independent report as possible. There are challenges within those 17 recommendations for the colleges. We do need to improve our communication networks right across the colleges so that we listen to and engage with all of our staff. But the key issue for us was that we're not cherry-picking any part of the report. We're accepting the report in full. We're aware there are challenges, but what outweighs those challenges is the very, very strong opportunities in moving forward.
What do you see as the timeline of the 17 recommendations? And you've said they're challenging, so
Okay.
What do you think is realistic for them?
Well, the report was launched last week, and we've indicated that we'd like the trade unions to come back in the next couple of weeks with what their initial thoughts would be. We have already been in contact with the sponsor department to begin now to look at establishing the task force. That's probably the first thing that we will put into train. In relation to some of the recommendations can probably be quite quick wins. There are other ones which will probably take a bit of teasing in terms of going forward. There are practicalities in terms of having a singular negotiating committee, because you're bringing together 3 different structures in the past into one larger structure, and there are probably practicalities to be ironed out for all stakeholders. That'll take a bit of time, but we would hope that quite a number of the recommendations will be implemented by certainly September this year. We would like that negotiating committee up and running at some stage in the next number of months.
I think there is a degree of urgency. I think that's been recognised by all parties, and the longer we have a period of uncertainty over the current structures, I think that's not a good thing, that level of uncertainty. So the main issue from our point, I think, is early engagement. We've invited the unions to engage with us in this task force, and I think the sooner we have that engagement, the sooner we can start working progressively through the various recommendations that the report's made.
I suppose, playing devil's advocate then, if the unions don't engage, because I can see from a perception of this also from the unions, it may be actually removing their autonomy by putting it all into one negotiating body rather than individual unions. If the unions don't engage, what's your plan B, or what do you do?
Well, I think everything that we're doing at the moment, particularly the fact that we engaged with all the recognised unions on the morning before the report was actually released, that everything was to do with getting buy-in from the unions. Now, at this point in time, I'd certainly be optimistic that we're going to get that, because certainly the initial reaction, and obviously, the unions will require a little bit of time to absorb the totality of the recommendations. But certainly, initial indications are that they would be prepared to engage with us. I think engagement is, as I said earlier, the key to it, because there are certain practicalities as to how a single committee would actually work. For instance, that can only be worked through, I think, in discussion with the various stakeholders. And I think we want to build, as Jerry said, on some of the positives as well, because that issue you raised about autonomy, there are different ways of looking at that. I mean, for example, one of the key things that Sir Bob found was that some of the support staff in the colleges found that perhaps they weren't given the same recognition as the teaching staff, and indeed the whole way we referred to them, which was as non-teaching staff, was found to be, slightly offensive. So one of the recommendations is to change that to educational support staff. So I think from the non-teaching unions, there was certainly a welcome for the fact that one of the objectives of the whole review is to ensure that everybody who works within the further education sector is recognised for the contribution that they make, and there aren't any sort of first or second category staff in the colleges, and that's certainly one of the things we'd like to reinforce, I think, out of the implementation of the report.
So then, just to finish off, then, would it be your intention then, Trevor, or your aspiration to have that negotiating table have representation from all those different levels? You know, from educational support staff, lecturers, middle managers, directors, and senior managers. Do you see that?
Absolutely. The commitment we're making is to get the task force up and running as soon as we can, because we think the earlier we start tackling some of these issues, the better the progress we can make. And I think when certainly the unions see we're prepared and open to having these sort of discussions about how the practicalities would work the way out, that they'll, the buy-in that we expect and hope from them will be actually reinforced.
I think, Chair, the final point I'll make there will be that in terms of moving forward, being transparent, building relationships, building trust, I think right across the piece is the important thing, and that's on all sides, because there have been very good examples where negotiating committees have worked very effectively in the past, particularly across the non-teaching negotiating and the directors negotiating committee. The lecturers negotiating committee, there have been issues, they're well documented. In terms of moving forward, relationships have to be built to be much more positive than where we were before, because there will always be challenges in any negotiating framework, but challenges can be overcome, they can be surmounted, but it does require trust to be built on all sides. We do believe that this gives an opportunity to move forward into that dynamic.
Okay, thanks. Sammy?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation so far. Obviously, we all agree that there has to be changes. We just can't continue the way we've done. I think you'd said, Trevor, over this past few years, because we'll end up with similar results. But could I ask you that these are very radical changes as such, and where would this sit with the likes of the industrial relations policies, say, with the universities, as an example, and if you look at their policies?
Well, colleagues can comment as well. I mean, what do we think we're doing here? And I think, Sir Robert did look at other examples of industrial relations practices. I think we would see this really as bringing the industrial relations framework and practices in the further education sector more into line with what you would find elsewhere in the public sector. You mentioned education, universities, but also more in line with the practices and frameworks which you would find in the FE sector in England, Scotland and Wales, for instance. So we don't necessarily see this as something kind of unusual or unique, more bringing practices which, to be honest, haven't been looked at maybe since the 1970s and 80s, up to date for the 21st century, and more in tune, I think, with developing workforce relationships which are suited to what the FE sector is being asked by government to actually do in terms of remain function. So it's a modernisation, it's an updating, and I think it's bringing practices more into line with what we see elsewhere.
And I think particularly, Sammy, as Trevor indicated, FE has changed dramatically in the last 20 years in terms of the role that the colleges play with business and industry and right at the centre of the economy, and that has to strengthen and develop if we're actually going to support the economy to turn around and be there to ensure that colleges are providing the right level of skills for business, for foreign direct investment coming in. There has to be that relationship colleges play.
And again, just my second, final question. Again, Trevor, you mentioned about a framework, and in relation to in one sense, we're talking about merging organisations who may not have been able to get on with each other, in the past, which is a difficult job in terms of managing the change. But will there be some sort of an evaluation framework that you'll monitor the whole process as it goes along?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I think the recommendation in the report, which specifically talks about the task force, its recommendation 17, is it? No, not 17, 15. 15 specifically talks about the remit of the task force, the membership, that it's, I think we've referred to that before about it being inclusive, but actually operating almost like a project management team with a specific brief. With milestones and monitoring the progress against those milestones with a communication process going alongside that. So that would be the kind of, I suppose, project management approach we would take, so that therefore there would have to be a monitoring and evaluation built into that. So I think that would be very important, yes.
Well, thanks so much, and I wish you well. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed from Sir Robert Salisbury's report that he's been somewhat damning of industrial relations within the colleges. And if I remember correctly what he said it wasn't fit for purpose. So, I do realise that there is a challenge here for the colleges, and I do commend you on the air of urgency that you have in moving forward on the 17 recommendations that are here. But how was this breakdown on industrial relations allowed to fester for so long before someone decided we need to grasp the nettle and we need to do something about it? Why was it allowed to run so long before someone decided, look, it's time we did something about this?
Well, I think what we had, to be honest, was a mixed picture. I think, to be fair, I mean, I was going to say unfortunately, maybe that's not the right way to put it. I've been involved in industrial relations in the sector for about 20 years now, and I probably bear the scars of that. But I mean, what I've observed over those 20 years is actually very mixed practice, and I think Sir Robert did refer, for instance, to the fact that some aspects of industrial relations, he referred particularly to what we now call the education support staff structures, actually worked very well, and there's been very positive engagement and good relationships. He did point to issues that had arisen through the lecturers' negotiating committee, and I think that those have been documented before. I think the issue for us really is what's the balance to be struck here between looking at the issues which led to that negative perception. So, the negative perception, some of them I think are fair, and some perhaps be unfair. The balance to be struck between looking at what caused that and what I suppose we're attempting to do with the Salisbury report, which is to draw a line under that and say, yeah, those things were unfortunate. They've had a negative effect in relation to how the perceptions of the sector. But if we're actually going to move in line with the rapid changes which Jerry made reference to, that the sector has had to adapt to over the number of years, at some point I think you have to draw a line under what has gone before and say, right, let's actually make a new start. And I think that's, we have taken the view, if you like, that the balance should tilt towards the latter approach. Say, right, we're drawing a line under what's happened. We understand some of the issues that there were. Let's take a step back. Let's say, well, what are we trying to do here in terms of modern industrial relationships? The question you were asked a bit earlier on about bringing things into line with practice elsewhere, for instance. So let's do that. Let's draw that line and kind of move forward. And that's a more positive and constructive approach to take than spending too much time trying to analyse what's gone in the past. Which is not to say we don't want to learn from things in the past. And there are practical things we can do. For instance, there's reference here to having a very clear deadlock breaking mechanism within the structures. And one of the things we've suffered from in the past is that hasn't been there. So when something is broken down, both sides have tended to step back and blame each other for the breakdown rather than looking for a constructive way to move forward. Where if you build in appropriate structures, such as a deadlock breaking mechanism, involve the Labour Relations Agency in that kind of process, then at least you have a way, if there is some kind of stalemate, of dealing with that and dealing with it relatively quickly, not letting things fester and actually move forward. So I think with the more of those kind of practical aspects there are to the recommendations, I think the more we can change the prevailing mood, if you like, to one that's a lot more positive.
I notice recommendation 15 talks about the task force and that it needs to be appointed immediately. And I was touching maybe on what the chair was, some of the things, issues the chair raised. But when do you anticipate that the task force will be in place and ready to take this forward?
The task force will be in place within the next couple of weeks, Tom. I think we only launched the report last Wednesday. We shared it with the trade union organisations in advance of that. What they all have come back and said that they wanted a bit of time to go away and take it through their executive teams, take it through their members, to at least get the feel for what would be the reaction to the report. We did indicate at the meeting we had with them that whilst we would encourage them to do that, as part of that process we'd like them to come back to us within the next couple of weeks to at least give us an indication as to where they stood with the report, because we will want to get the task force up and running. I think building confidence is a key element to this, and for us that's about listening to what trade union organisations have got to say, because if we are going to move forward and deliver this and deliver more positive, fruitful industrial relations, it will be taking cognizance of what all the stakeholders have to play, because no doubt you talked about the past. There are elements that worked very well in the past, there were elements that didn't work very well. being aware of that and being aware of where the mistakes have been made in the past by all parties, we want to move into a new environment where I think trust is right at the centre of that. Because if we can build that trust, build that transparency and relationship building, that when we do encounter issues that we have to get around or go over or go under, that at least we can do that, as opposed to in the past where things get caught in the bends. But that task force will be up and running within the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah. I think one of the key recommendations is number 2, where it's an employer-led employee relations framework. I think that's where everything broke down in the past, and we were dealing with one college where there was problems, and it was a difficulty between an employer-employee problem. I think if you can get that brought into harmony, then that's you're a good footing to take it forward.
One of the key tenets of the report, Tom, is the fact that collective bargaining is a strength for the sector. We've got 6 regional colleges. Whilst there's always an opportunity to have individual issues that may be taken through some sort of plant bargaining or plant consultation, the collective strength of the colleges coming together and operating with the unions to ensure there's a consistency of approach that can be only good for the whole FE sector.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Fra?
Chair, and some of the questions I was going to ask have been asked by Sammy and Tom, but there's just a couple. And you spoke about representatives of non-unionised workers. How is that managed, or how is it done? And is there a group that represents the non-unionised workers, or is it an individual that you...
The first thing for us is that Sir Bob Salisbury met with all representatives of all staff within the colleges. So when he went, he held specific focus groups in each of the 6 colleges where there were representation from staff who are not members of unions. So that meant that that voice was being listened to, which is very, very important in moving forward. This is one of the challenges, I think, for taking these recommendations and the whole report forward, is how do we get a practical solution to ensuring that the voice of those staff who play a very positive role within the colleges, that their voice is heard, that it's listened to, and that they can contribute to the process. My view, and we don't have any particular answer written down at this moment in time, is to take that through the task force, where there will be representation from all those various stakeholder constituencies, but also there will be a voice of the non-unionised staff as well, to look at how do we involve that, because there are issues, there will be potential issues for trade unions there if we see that that is a potential dissolution of maybe what their role would be. But the clear recommendation from Sir Bob Salisbury was that this was to have an all-embracing environment where everybody has an opportunity to play a role in the future success of FE. So that's one of the challenges, and I think the task force will begin to unpick that and see how that actually works.
I understand that, what you're saying, but in terms of a task force or a group meeting, how do you choose somebody from a non-unionised group to represent like an organised union? Getting a representative there to thing, be far better represented by trade unions. But the fact of life is, how do you pick somebody from that broad group to represent? Do they say, well, we have Jerry Campbell to represent us here as a thing? How does that happen?
I think it's something we probably really at this moment have to give consideration and thought to as to how we actually take that forward.
I think an important point as well is to make a distinction between the consultative process and the formal negotiating process. I mean, one of the things that Sir Bob found was that unfortunately, a lot of the staff that he met weren't very well informed about what's going on in industrial relations, and there's obviously a challenge for us in terms of actually addressing that from the college management point of view. But he was very keen to, I suppose, enhance the consultative process so that more staff are involved, if you like, from the ground up in relation to the development of policies and procedures within the college, which is obviously something that's a weakness there at the minute. And there are various mechanisms within colleges, I think, that you can use to involve your staff more in that process. But I think it's important for us then to draw a distinction between that consultative process and then the formal negotiations of pay and conditions, where we have to be clear here. We're dealing with the recognised trade unions who obviously have rights to represent their members in relation to the formalities of negotiations. So I think that was one of the distinctions Sir Bob was drawing in the report, and it's a very important one, the distinction between the formal negotiations, which we want to have concentrating on pay and conditions of service, the core issues, if you like, in relation to staff, and then the wider consultative structures that would allow more staff, whether they're in unions or not in unions, to have a say in the development of policies and procedures which would ultimately affect the way they work and the way that they engage with their employers.
Obviously, if we probably were sitting at it from a trade union point of view, we would see it as a direct threat to their existence with an input. See this, to move it on, and I noticed in the methodology, talked that as part of the process the trade unions were spoken to. So I take it they have had full involvement in the drawing up of and the production of this document.
The whole process was that Sir Bob Salisbury went and had individual meetings, had focus meetings with a wide range of stakeholders, but all the relevant trade unions who would have been involved in the further education process had an opportunity to sit down with Sir Bob and go through have a chat, basically under Chatham House rules, go through in terms of what happens in relation to industrial relations. So the issues that come out of this, I think, in terms of 17 recommendations, were probably not any real great surprise to any of the stakeholders, because they would have been part of the discussions that Sir Bob would have had.
And I think you spoke about equality at the start, and I think that goes to the heart of anything, and it's important, as long as there's a level playing field for everybody to have their spoken. And Tom talked about it, an employer-led approach to this here, but it has to be a partnership approach to ensure that everybody's been brought on board if the thing's ever to be successful. I do agree with you. There's huge differences between what it was like 20 years ago and what it was like now. But unless everybody is treated as equals in a negotiation process, then you start to lose control of things.
And I think certainly as part of the consultation process that Sir Bob Salisbury went through, no one union was treated any differently than anybody else. And as part of even the release of the report and the engagement that we have had with the trade unions, we called them all together into one room. So the report has been shared with them all at the same time. We've had that meeting. Our view in terms of moving forward is very, very clear that recommendation from Sir Bob Salisbury provides an opportunity to recognise the value that all staff play at all levels, because we wouldn't be able to deliver the outcomes and results within FA if it wasn't for support staff who are supporting lecturers, or management as well. Everybody has a very positive role to play, and whilst there's differences within that, it does recognise and give an opportunity to say, well, listen, everybody has a very positive role to play in moving forward for the future.
David?
Thanks, Chair. My attention was drawn to recommendation number 5, and I think it's a very good recommendation in relation to what is now known as the educational support staff. And I know you have a very tight timeline, and I wish you as well with that. But playing devil's advocate, we've seen the support staff in other sectors have suffered, and I'm hoping you're not going to tell me that this could be used as a cloak some way to maybe not get rid of support staff, but can you assure us what it says on the tin is what it means? Yeah.
I'm very happy, I'm sure Trevor will endorse this as well. This report was primarily to look at improving our industrial relations right across the colleges. There's no hidden agendas in terms of staffing levels or any future action being taken in relation to that. This is very much about ensuring that industrial relations are improved. We've talked about the past where there have been difficult issues. This is looking at a new framework, but one that can support the colleges, to actually make the colleges stronger in achieving better outcomes for learners, for students, but also for the Northern Ireland economy. So I think from that perspective, that is what it says, is really what we're looking to take forward.
Just if I could add to that, I mean, we talked about changes within the further education sector. I mean, one of the big changes that I've seen in my time is that you could say that 20, 25 years ago, a college consisted of a relatively large number of teachers and a small number of admin staff. But I mean, one of the big changes now is that so many of the functions, essential support functions, educational support and other forms of support that are done in colleges are actually carried out by not by teachers but by other types of staff, and there's been quite a development of the range of roles and jobs provided by people in the colleges who are not teachers. And I think that's one of the issues that Sir Bob picked up, and I referred to this earlier on, that it's partly a recognition of that, I think, or in recognition of that those staff feel that they should be given greater recognition, I suppose, or equality, whatever word we want to use, in relation to their contribution to the work of college. and obviously Sir Robert picked that up, and we maybe weren't as aware as we should have been that if you refer to people as non-teaching staff, it's maybe not regarded as complementary, and that therefore it's overdue that we should change it. Actually, within the college ourselves, as Barbara would be aware, I mean, we talk about teaching staff and support staff anyway. That's normally the sort of the title we would have used. But yeah, I think we're really catching up here with the reality in the colleges, which is that the colleges are now multidisciplinary, multi-professional organisations with a whole range of people from different backgrounds, academic and otherwise, who are making a contribution to what an FE college is in the 21st century.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, folks, thank you very much. I find that very useful. If there's anything else you want to come back, then maybe we'll keep an eye just on the progress of how things go, if you want to keep us updated.
Very happy to come back again, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, members content. Move on then. Our briefing is the departmental briefing on the Disability Employment Service Strategic Review. Just remind members this will be covered by Hansard. It's not.
Find the first.
Okay, members, then at page 254 of your packs, the departmental briefing paper, and 256 is the PowerPoint. We have officials.
Yeah, please wait. Any other briefings at the Habsburg?
Good job.
Okay, folks, you're very welcome. Can I just welcome Terry Park, Head of Disability Employment Service for the Department, Mrs Margaret Haddock, Chief Executive, Ulsterville Society, and Mr Sam Humphreys, Chief Executive, USL. Second week in a row, Sam.
In the hub.
Okay, folks, just over to yourselves. If you could keep your briefing to the committee, maybe about 10 minutes or so, so we can get down to questions, really.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, it's myself, Margaret and Sam, and what we'll do, we'll just talk through the presentation as briefly as we can. First of all, we're very pleased to have this opportunity to brief the committee just on the progress that we've been able to achieve thus far, and more, I suppose, then through the question discussions to outline our hopes and plans for the future going forward. So what I was going to do first of all is just allow Sam just to give a very short, brief introduction on himself, and then Margaret, and then I'll talk through the presentation.
Well, I think the committee are fairly aware of Ulster Supported Employment Limited. We've been in existence for 52 years, delivering supported employment service to people with disabilities. I know a number of the committee were up last week, and a number of other committee members have been with us to see the organisation. We're quite excited about the opportunity to be part of this, because it's an engagement process whereby all of us within the sector are recognised as stakeholders and providers. And the department are engaging with us and listening to the opportunities that we can put before them, and the views that we have, and that will formulate then the final strategy. And we're particularly glad to be part of that, because while we're an arm's length body under the department, it's sometimes you're never sure whether you're really seen as part of the overall sector. But I have to say, throughout this process, it has been a truly inclusive process, and we're delighted to be part of it. So I appreciate the opportunity just to be here to support this today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Margaret Haddock, Deputy Chief Executive of the Orchardville Society, an organisation which provides services, some under DEL programme and some under European Social Fund, to people with severe learning disability using the model of supported employment. But I'm also delighted in a couple of other hats I have on, which I think have been very welcomed by DES during this strategy, and that's I'm the current chair of the Northern Ireland Union of Supported Employment and the president across Europe at the moment. So the work that of supported employment, and as Terry will be going on to explain how they're looking at that and recognising that, we as a sector are delighted to be involved in this strategy, and just say we've had very robust discussions throughout this last year and a bit for this strategy to date, and I'm sure we'll have more robust discussions in the future, but I think it is truly a partnership approach, and we welcome that.
Okay, I'll walk through the presentation, and I will keep it as brief as I can then. In terms of the strategic context, I think there's a combination of initiatives happening at the moment, including NEAT strategy, economic inactivity, and I think a recognition that as an employment service we need to do as much as we can through our mainstream programmes to help as many people, and especially those who are disadvantaged or are not quite job ready. But despite all else that's going on, I think there was a feeling amongst the people within the Disability Employment Service and the sector that there was something specific and additional that was required for people with disabilities, and it does come at it. It's quite timely in that DWP and GB are developing a strategy. I've been keeping quite regular contact, and I'm due to visit them in a couple of weeks' time just to see where they are with their strategy. And the Department for Social Protection down south are also working along with ourselves and DWP. I think more following the lead that we're hoping to give to them. So we're keeping a very close eye on what's happening in other parts not too far away. In terms of the strategic working group, really there was it kicked off with proposals around a departmental wage strategy that would pull in other parts of DEL, but as with a lot of these things, it wasn't happening just quickly enough for ourselves, and we decided to take the lead on a specific disability employment strategy. And as you can see then from the working group membership, there is a really good spread of disability organisations and therefore people with disabilities being represented. Other groups that were included in the initial scoping workshop included the RNIB, the National Autistic Society and Macmillan Cancer Group. So they're keeping very closely sighted on what's happening, but didn't feel the need to be involved at the strategic working group. But we're also working in partnership with those on other projects. In terms then of the progress so far, we have worked really hard among the group to try and identify who is our target group as distinct from others, to agree on the key headline aspects of work that we want to focus on, and then probably the most challenging bit will be to formulate the detail below that, which will be looking at key objectives, performance indicators where possible. It won't always be possible to define those in maybe the first year or so, but we'll get there throughout the duration of the strategy. And quite simply, we've headlined the strategic objective is just to help and support as many disabled people as possible to move into, sustain and retain paid employment. Again, recognising that for this particular group, it won't be a case of moving in day one or day two straight into a paid job. There's work that needs to encourage and develop, and then particularly when people do find their way into work, that the support does not stop there, which is a key feature of the supported employment model. On to the key themes then that we've agreed so far. And I say so far because we've still go through a further consultation period, but thus far amongst the group and having discussed it with the many users, we're sitting at the moment with 5 key themes. The first 3 are, I suppose, more the externally focused. The last 2 are more support and enabling themes, but the first one is critical. That will determine whether this strategy has been successful in 3, 5, 10 years' time, and that's really to ensure that we are helping more people with perhaps complex and long-term disabilities into the labour market. As you can see there, we are looking to focus, and maybe it's a case of refocusing our energies and efforts on young people. We're looking to introduce the supported employment model as our declared model of choice, and then we're looking to reintroduce more disability specialists within the department, as well as obviously working with the disability specialists that are out within the community and voluntary sector. So it's really to try and collaborate as much as we possibly can.
On the supported employment model?
Yep.
On the supported employment model, I'd like to commend DES for adopting this as their model of intervention. Supported employment, I thought we should just mention a few words about what it is. It's not rocket science. It's a small 5-stage process which works with disabled and was designed to work specifically with disabled people, whilst now currently being used across Europe for other disadvantaged sectors as well. However, its primary focus was always those furthest for the labour market, and it is a small 5-stage process. And now that this has been identified as the recognised model, I think that this will blow away a lot of myths about disabled people not being able to work, because if we go to the United Nations Convention, it sits very perfectly with that as well, that everyone has the right to work for paid employment in the open labour market, and that's what supported employment is about, the open labour market.
And again, just the focus on young people is primarily about trying to prevent people from becoming economically inactive, as opposed to reducing the levels. And what we're looking to do is focus on a cohort at a time that, despite their disabilities, and for a lot of people, particularly with learning disability, they may be quite severe, but they share the same aspirations and, most importantly, the same motivation levels as their non-disabled peers. So it's catching them at the time whenever they have the confidence and attitude, provided they have the right support, to find their way into employment. You know, the stats tell you that someone with a disability, if they even reach their mid-20s, they're 4 times more likely never to become employed, as opposed to someone who hasn't got that disability. So it's working on that prevention rather than trying to reduce the overall numbers. Again, that's one of the primary reasons why we're looking to focus on an age profile. And the next slide demonstrates that. You know, we have many young disabled people who are going through further education college, through training programmes, are being seen and advised by our own departmental careers service as well as schools careers officers. We have the European Social Fund projects that both Margaret and Sam's organisation and many others are doing sterling work with, building up someone's employability skills, giving them vocational qualifications. But what happens to them? Who's resourcing that support that makes a difference and bridges that skills into an employment opportunity? Where good quality work placements and work experience opportunities are vital to secure the job. We'd also work with wider community and voluntary sector organisations, many very local ones that we maybe don't have contracts or formal relationships with, so it's a case of spreading the net as widely as possible, and of course not forgetting our own statutory services as well. In terms of the consultation and engagement, I mean, this has been one of the real positives from certainly my own point of view and those of my colleagues. We've had 5 main user engagement events dotted around the various regions, and they've been attended by more than 220 disabled people themselves, and then that's been fairly enhanced by support workers and other representatives from the disability sector. There's been lots of discussion, again very robust discussion around the room, where people have been very honest and forthright in saying what they see as the real barriers that is stopping them getting into work, and that's given us real food for thought, almost to decipher what ones we can do something about very quickly and others that we will need to spend a little bit of time and certainly collaborate with others to try and do something about. And I think they've genuinely appreciated the opportunity. We're working at the moment at collating all this information, and it will definitely be evidenced in both the consultation document and the strategy when it comes to fruition. And I know Margaret certainly has been involved in lots of consultation processes and has been very praiseworthy of this exercise.
Yes, I would like to say that DESC engaged with the Northern Ireland Union of Supported Employment, which is an organisation which is neutral with regard to people with disability, in that it doesn't provide any DEL services. So it brought together all the people for the consultation event, and it was truly Northern Ireland wide and truly pan-disability as a result of that. And I would like to also say that we welcomed the support of the Minister himself at one of the events, and I think that gave strength to the events and the consultation. And as we said, we asked the question, what recommendations would they like to see to go into this strategy? And the draft has 2 pages of recommendations coming from people with disability with regards to things they would like to see, obviously from support workers, but also through to issues which are interdepartmental, and I know that will be very challenging for us all, but it is something that I think we need to take cognizance that DES alone can't deliver everything that's needed.
Yeah, and I mean, I am heartened, and I don't know whether it's due to this committee's inquiry or whether there's any dual membership of the Education Committee, but it's interesting that I've been asked by the official to meet with them in the next couple of weeks to look at how we could collaborate with regard to people with special educational needs and help them in the employment, and not just the next step on the ladder, which tends to be maybe FE or other training provision. So there's maybe a focus there on helping people, because there's lots of young people coming out at 16 years of age, like non-disabled school leavers, who aren't that interested in going to FE. They just want to get a job, but maybe that's not an option or an avenue that's being sold to them as much. So we're hoping to maybe bridge a gap there, and I'm certainly going to involve the Career Service in that meeting as well, because they are the conduit between DE and ourselves at the moment. So finally, and just the next steps by way of proposed timelines, we're working amongst the strategic working group at the draft consultation document at the moment. We're hoping to have that finalised by end of April, and then the proposal at the moment would be to send it out for wider consultation, so around about May time. Well, obviously, as with all, we'll take on board the feedback that comes from that. I suppose we're heartened by the fact that we have the disability sector so ingrained in the production of that, that hopefully we're not missing too many obvious things, but you can never be complacent. And then hopefully we'll be looking at the autumn time for the approval of what would be a much more succinct and straightforward disability strategy document that I see more. The most important bit of that is really the actions that we're proposing will come out of it. So with a good wind, we'll be looking at towards the end of the year for the publication of the strategy. I'm conscious of the economic and activity strategy, and it's going through public consultation at the moment, so I would almost like to be in the lag of it so that we can make sure that there's not as much overlap or duplication, more importantly, that we add to and complement what comes out of that strategy. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Spoken. Thanks for your presentation. Terry, I suppose I'll start by just commending you for bringing in Sam and Margaret along with you, because I do think it demonstrates just the complete involvement that the department has taken in this strategy, and I think that's worth noting and for the committee to recognise as well, because that's crucial. I think we're seeing that as we move into our own inquiry into the post-19 SEND provision and even those transitions there. Terry, I suppose one thing that did prick my query really, I suppose, was you mentioned your involvement with DWP.
Mm-hmm.
How is this connected, or is there any connection with welfare reform, or do you see it?
Well, I must say from a personal point of view, I'm steering well clear of welfare reform. I'm focusing on the disability policy unit within DWP, because I'm more interested in what additional and specialist service we can provide. I am hopeful that some way down the line there may be aspects of welfare reform that actually work to the benefit of this particular client group. I mean, if it is as true to the policy statement that any amount of hours worked will be recognised as economic and employment, that will be a major shift for this particular group. The 16-hour threshold works very much against people with more significant long-term disabilities. So that's the one aspect of welfare reform that I would certainly welcome for this group. But other than that, I am not focusing on the benefit conditionality regime. I'm working on the basis of, we will be helping people progress towards employment, and once they're in employment, provided they have the right support, which could be quite intense and long term, they can work as well as anyone else.
Okay, thanks. I suppose one of the main points is the reintroduction of the Specialist Disability Employment Officers. When do you see that being a reality? How many do you see? Where will they be?
It's very early stage to say exactly the numbers. We you know, amongst the strategic working group, we have ideas in our mind. We would want them to have a presence across the 3 employment service regions. In terms of timeliness, if they're going to be part of one of the maybe first actions coming out of the strategy, we could be looking at the early part of next year. That would allow us to, at the later stage of developing the strategy, to be doing the preparation of the recruitment selection methods that we would want to use. Working out the job descriptions and the career development plan we would want to put in place for those specialists. So I would be hopeful personally that it would be the early part of 2015, and I would be looking to have a presence and not just one person per employment service region. But those are obviously a lot of internal discussions, as well as amongst the sector representatives, to have to really to try and scope it out. What will be their defined job role, as opposed to the employment support officers that work with within the sector organisations. There may, I mean, if we're going to make a real success of the strategy, there may be issues around resourcing within the community and voluntary disability organisations as well. We're looking to have enough resource here that can provide the service for the suggested numbers we think will be coming into access to the strategy services.
Okay, thanks. Sammy?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for the presentation. And certainly we concur with the Chair about Sam and Mark. I think it's a good model of like yourself. I know you've been here before, Terry. Yeah. That's very helpful. Just a couple of things. I had a young man who had worked for me a couple of years ago, and he had a disability, and he died, and he had a major operation. But he was such an inspiration that we actually set up a trust, AT Inspires author, you know Margaret Jonathan Tate. But he really was an inspiration, and we're raising some money for some hospital equipment. So I would certainly, I've had experience, and I'm a young man at the moment working with it, and it's been a very good experience. A couple of things, Margaret, you talked about your European links, and I know you're president.
Yes.
How does what we do here in Northern Ireland compare with some of the regions in the rest of Europe?
I think now that we're going to recognise supported employment, we in Northern Ireland with the supported employment model would be seen as leaders. If I give a very brief history of supported employment, it came in via the Republic of Ireland. It was driven through by a man originally called Christy Lynch and a lady in the north of Ireland that you will all have known, Monica Wilson. And they were the 2 first drivers 20 years ago. And what has happened since then is the European Union of Supported Employment was established 20 years ago last year, and we're now in 24 countries, recognised in 24 countries across Europe. But practice through the work of the ESF projects that are funded here in Northern Ireland, we would be seen as very good. What has held us back is there hasn't at a departmental level until now, which I really commend Terry for, a true recognition of supported employment. In any strategy, there have been piecemeal pieces lifted out for many of the programmes that are around, but nothing has been called, or the terminology of supported employment hasn't really been recognised, so we welcome that. But in practice, we'd be seen as well developed. People come and visit us regularly to see what we're doing. And I think that's reflected in the fact that one of the previous presidents was Monica. I'm a president, and the previous president was Christy Lynch. So 3 out of 4 presidents in 20 years have come from the island of Ireland, 2 from the north. So I think that speaks volumes.
And maybe we could just go back to Terry in relation to the consultation. What's been the response from the likes of Stormont here, the officials of Stormont, and also in the public sector as well, because that's always been mooted as a tremendous opportunities, huge number of employees and opportunities for people who have disabilities.
Yeah, I mean, so far, some of the consultation has focused on who we thought was the most important group of this, and that has been people with disabilities, their organisations. We had an employer engagement event. It was a mix of public, private, and some of the private sector umbrella organisations. But it was too small scale to get a real handle on it, and as with a lot of these, when you invite people along, you tend to get the equality champions who come along, so you're preaching to the converted, and they were very supportive of what we're trying to achieve. I think what we need to do, especially through the employers theme in the strategy, and that's the bit that I see as the biggest challenge in this, we can put in place all the disability specialists, both internally and externally. We can throw lots of money at this. Unless we get employers to change their attitudes, then we're going to be facing an uphill battle. But I think if we go at this together and we use all of the tools that we have at our disposal, I see the employer theme as being the real game changer here. I think it's a mix of education of employers. It's making them very aware of the really good support services that are already in place that a lot of them don't seem to be aware of. So we need to get our marketing right. But I think it's also about using the legislation. Positive discrimination is permissible, particularly for people with disabilities. And I think we need to be using a little bit more persuasion with employers, particularly when they're recruiting people. I don't think you were here a couple of weeks ago, was saying the Belfast City Council have been very cooperative with us, and that they have ring-fenced jobs for people with disabilities, as well as doing what a lot of other good employers have done. They've ring-fenced individual interview opportunities for people with disabilities, allowed a lot more flexibility through the application process. So I think we've got a model there that has worked very well with employers. Disability Confident is an employer campaign that was introduced last July in GB, and it's something that I would intend to mirror. Not totally. The good thing about watching someone else do it in advance is we'll pickpocket the bits that we think will work for ourselves, but then add on our own initiatives. So I think there's a lot more we can do with employers across all the sectors. And maybe it is time through the Assembly and through the civil service to show a bit of leadership in that front.
Good point.
It's my understanding that this committee has already approved to lead on a job shadow day this year for people with disability in conjunction with the Northern Ireland Union of Supported Employment. And I think the launch of that's coming up towards the end of April, and there'll be a day. And I think events like that also will promote and let people with disability be seen at the places they need to be seen in this building, in the workings of government. And I think this is an excellent first step, and I'd like to thank you for that.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Sammy. Bronwyn.
Thank you for your presentation, and my point was sort of touched on. You made a very important point earlier on about young people out there with disabilities share the same aspirations and motivations as everyone else, but the labour market out there does not accommodate them. And I was going to ask, what concerns and feedback are you getting from the people on the ground regarding that? And how can we ensure, that those young people are getting the same equality of opportunity as everyone else? And again, you touched on potential legislative changes. Yeah. You mentioned the welfare reform. I don't think we can avoid that, because I think lessons have to be learned by the way this issue was handled out in Britain regarding this very vulnerable group of people, and we shouldn't move away from that. Can you give me some feedback, from practitioners on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, some of the in the information that we're clearing at the moment, we've got this whole raft of raw data that has come back from the user engagement events. The young people are saying that educational attainment and qualifications are a barrier. So the standards that employers are setting for everyone. We're saying, can there not be flexibility? The application processes that seem to be very standard for the huge bulk of employers doesn't necessarily sit as a best fit for young people with disabilities. There's also, what is the vehicle that we're using to help someone prepare for work? At the moment, we have the further education sector We have the ESF projects, but I think we need to investigate, are we tailoring those type of employability and educational programmes for the particular client group that we're looking to help and support through this strategy?
And are we doing that?
I'd say like a lot of the services, you could probably see pockets of really good practice, but it's not universal, and that's what we need to get in and interrogate. I need to work with colleagues in the FE sector, and some of them are very, very keen to get involved in this piece of work, particularly those that are involved with the discrete learning units in the FE sector. And we need to tie better in with the careers advisors.
So while you're recognising there's a problem, but we haven't actually drilled down on that to actually deal with that?
I think that's a fair enough comment, Bronwyn.
So when are we going to do that?
Well, I think, you know, there's an issue about, you know, whether we do all the drilling down and then start to formulate a strategy. My view would be, you know, let's get on from day one with helping as many people as we possibly can, whilst we do, you know, the research and development sounds quite fancy. I think a lot of that, there will be some very, you know, high-level pieces of research that we will commission and pay for through this strategy, but a lot of it will be actually getting in and fact-find and find out what is happening with regard to the pre-employment services and programmes that are available right across all the various regions. So, you know, it's probably happening day and daily, but it's not being captured all in one place, and I think that's one of the key pieces of work that the strategy needs to do. It needs to actually coordinate all of that information in one place. I mean, there are lots of young people who are successfully moving into employment, but because, again, we're not tracking those, we're not even capturing the good practice that we're able to mirror. So again, certainly one of the objectives I have is that we have a totally new and more robust management information system that is tracking people from school age through to employment or wherever they decide to go. Because, I say, unfortunately, these people haven't been maybe at the forefront of even the policymakers' mind, because if you think of the programme for government, the focus is on moving people who are on the unemployment register. A lot of these people don't feature on the unemployment register because they're not on job seekers allowance, they're maybe being looked after through family and other carers. So there's a lot of these people, particularly at the young age, who haven't been captured anywhere on a central database.
I know you mentioned, that there are a lot of young people in there who have successfully got jobs, but equally as well, if the labour market out there is not accommodating young people, they may be in jobs where they don't want to be, so thereby the box is ticked. And that's not equality of opportunity.
No, and I think that's one of the real strengths of the supported employment model. We've alluded to the further education pilot project, and it would mirror a lot what happens in European social fund projects. The supported employment model is based on the premise that you work intensely with a young person, not just to find out what their general strengths are, but what is the vocation that they're looking to move into. And we had one or two instances where there were people who had been put into the usual work placements through their FE college, and it was effectively the local employer who was quite friendly in terms of allowing people with disabilities to spend a day or so in their organisation. But once we matched them up with an employment officer, we found out that the young person had no interest whatsoever in working in that area. So it was a case of, let's take it back a step. What particular area of work would you like to move into? And it was two really, heartwarming stories, because one wanted to work with animals, and they moved into one of the local sort of kennels, working there as grooming dogs and things like that. And then the other one was really interested in, martial arts, and they've got a job now in a local boxing club out at Newton Abbey. So that's a key to it. I think with this particular client group in particular, the job matching is a vital aspect of the supported employment model, and I'm sure Margaret and Sam would vouch for that.
Right, Sam, would you like to speak?
No, I mean, I think, and I would concur with what Terry said. I mean, I think this space is very heavily serviced right now by the ESF programmes. The ESF programmes tend to support the aspirations, and they tend to interact with that group of young people in a way that the more formalised programmes maybe aren't at this stage. I think Training for Success and the disability supports that are available within that is going some way towards that. But I think the issue is that, you know, a disabled person or an individual who has a disability has the same sort of aspirations as a non-disabled person, and the reality of full integration in life is we don't always get what we want. Sometimes we have to get what's available to us, you know. And I think that's something that we as a society have to be ready for, and individuals. And it's a question of measuring and helping people to understand their aspirations. When we talked about this last week, where you have issues where some of the family members have unrealistic aspirations for their young people, and that's the same whether you're disabled or non-disabled, you know.
I also think it dovetails into the post-19 issue, in that what are we doing in schools, in special education curriculum? Is it helping us prepare people even to make an informed choice? In Orchardville, through our ESF programme, since 1996, we have been delivering what we refer to internally as a career development programme, and hopefully, Terry would think that's a pocket of good practice. Yeah. And therefore, what's happening is we're in the areas we're working, we're finding young people very well prepared, ready to go out into the world of work and ready to access one of the programmes like Workable or Work Connect, or Access to Work with or Training for Success with the appropriate support. But if those young people weren't prepared, it has been said in evaluations that they wouldn't even be ready for FE college. So there is work to be done even before the post-19 provision is designed. It's what's happening prior, and that's the cross-departmental issue that are one of the key cross-departmental issues that I would refer to for any success. So we have that at the beginning, and as Terry says at the end, we must have the employers change, because without both of those, we can keep doing all the bits in the middle, but they won't work.
I think there's a challenge here for the FE sector, and even the disability organisations and others who are providing the employability. Everybody has to think, okay, we have run certain courses and certain subjects because they have been, you know, the standard recipe for young disabled people. But if that's not a match with the labour market, then, you know, is it really doing them a service? So we've got to look at what are the growth sectors, accepting that the people with disabilities may be looking at certain sectors where they will get easier access into work, and focus the vocational profile and training on those. So I think that's something that we want to definitely capture, that we're preparing the people with the right training and skills in the same way as we do with all our young people, as opposed to doing something because it's always been the programmes that have been delivered for these people.
I think there's a really positive thing that has happened over the past number of years that shouldn't be missed. About 4 or 5 years ago, the department accepted the concept of passporting and conduiting. It used to be programmes were discrete, so an individual went onto a programme, they were on and they were off. Whereas today, for example, our ESF programme, we have young people who are in traineeships for 6 months, and then we have the likes of Workable. So we're able to use that as a conduit for that young person to remain in that employment and to move on through the Workable programme. And that joined up thinking is absolutely crucial in this space.
David?
Thanks, Chair, and again, Terry, you're very welcome. It was myself raised with you the situation going forward with RPA the last time. And
yeah.
I was very glad to hear a very welcome response from you and what's been achieved so far and how it can move forward. Just a very simple question in relation to the process in front of yourselves, and I don't envy you, as I think there's a lot of work to be done there, and indeed you've really touched upon the raw data that's coming through, and obviously a thorough scoping that it really needs done. Your timeline indicates in your document December. You were saying autumn potentially for a launch or whatnot. Are you being a wee bit hard on yourself there potentially? I think there's a bit of work to do.
Yeah,
Are you optimistic? No.
I think what we've got to do, regardless of when the final date is achieved, we've got to keep the momentum going in this. We meet on a monthly basis, the strategic working group, and therefore at the end of each monthly meeting there's a certain amount of actions. At least at the moment we're in the detail of the draft consultation document, and we're thrashing that out amongst the group. There's been lots of comments back. Edith Dunlap from the Northern Ireland Union of Supported Employment is working on the collation of all the data from the user engagement events. So we've got lots of people working on this, as a priority. That's notwithstanding lots of all the other things that we're doing as well to try and keep people with disabilities moving into employment. But I mean, I'm quite hopeful. What I don't want to do is make this document so heavy and unwieldy that even for consultation purposes, it's hard for people to get a real grasp of what we're trying to achieve. So almost part of the work now is to strip it back a little bit, so that it's an easier document for people who are going to be involved in the consultation process to understand what it is that we're looking to achieve. And then hopefully when it gets to the autumn and we gather back the wider consultation, we strip it back even further and make it a very simple document. I think sometimes strategies can be
very much,
almost difficult for any reader to understand. And we've got to think, who is the audience for this strategy?
Potentially off-putting at times.
Yeah. So it's more about summarising what the key themes are and putting in place what our proposed actions are and what we hope to achieve. And I say where we can put targets and performance indicators in, let's do it. Even if it is setting ourselves a challenge that we'll be questioning on in the future. I think now's the time to do it for this particular group, and it will be it'll be a collective effort right throughout the duration of the strategy. What we intend to do is put together a stakeholder group, a high-level stakeholder group that will oversee the outworkings of this strategy and hold the likes of ourselves accountable to what we said we're hoping to achieve in the 3 to 5 years, whatever term we decide to put on it. It's a major challenge, but this is the first piece of work. Hopefully, when we get to the end of this period of strategy, things will be embedded, so it's a lot easier for whoever's picking up the work thereafter. So it's a time where I think we do need to take stock and maybe, between the statutory government departments, and I really do need to pull other people into this, but particularly working hand in hand with the sector to maybe put in place a bit of a legacy here.
Moving forward, yeah.
All right. Terry, just one thing you mentioned was the engagement really moving into FE colleges. What input do you have to the courses that FE colleges could supply or do supply?
I think up until now, within the realms of this strategy, we've been focusing on the discrete learning units and the type of courses that they have been delivering. I think as a department who has ultimate responsibility for the further education colleges, I don't see any reason why we couldn't have some influence there. It would obviously have to be done in partnership with the various colleges. The good thing about it is that you have a group of people who are employed by the FE sector within the colleges who have a particular interest in this student group as well. So I think, hopefully we'll be pushing an open door there in relation to if we need to make some tweaks and changes. And again, I would want to use the sector representative to help influence what courses we think need to be delivered through that medium. The FE sector has lots of its own challenges, and we no doubt will be looking to add to that through this strategy. But I think it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile in this particular aspect.
I would think across Northern Ireland the sector has engaged with FE in trying to shape some employability type courses. I can only speak for myself here at the moment and Belfast Met, and that Orchardville actually had a partnership at one stage with Old Belfast, or Biffy as we all used to say, now Belfast Met, and we'd work hand in hand, but that it is piecemeal still across Northern Ireland, and I think Terry's plan to make it more available and more equal is to be welcomed. I think one of the challenges is that the courses that are on offer in FE will actually move the people forward from coming out of special education units or special education schools, that if they do go to FE for 2 to 3 years, that those courses will help prepare them better for adulthood and the world of work. So I think that's a big piece of work that will need to be done in partnership.
Okay. And there's nobody else. Terry, Margaret, Sam, thank you very much for coming along this morning. Presentation has been appreciated, and well, you're aware of our inquiry, so I'm sure we'll be talking to you again, I think, at some stage. So
okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Funny yourself, okay.
Okay, members, moving on then, agenda item 10, if you're content, is the departmental briefing proposed consultation on the conduct of employment agencies. And it's at pages 265 of your packs. Members, this session will be recorded by Hansard, so just beware of your electronic devices. Could I welcome Mr Conor Brady, Head of Employment Relations Policy Legislation Branch, and Ms Deirdre Walsh, Employment Relations Policy and Legislation. Folks,
thank you very much, Chair.
Welcome here this morning, and could I just have a 10-minute briefing maybe, and then we'll go on to questions.
I think we can probably do it in 5 minutes.
Do well, Conor.
So we're going to give the committee, if the committee's content, just a very brief overview of the content of the proposed consultation, but equally as importantly, the methodology which we've used just to get to the point where we've reached those particular proposals. As the committee already knows, the Minister launched a fundamental review of employment law back in 2012. Under the better regulation strand of that review, the Department initiated a pilot review of employment regulations, which was designed to inform the methodology for a full review of all employment regulations. One of the main attractions of choosing these particular conduct regulations for the pilot was the fact that we also have responsibility as a department for the enforcement of the conduct regulations through the Employment Agency Inspectorate, as well as responsibility for the legislation itself. So we have access to revising the legislation, as well as having significant awareness of the operational outworkings of it. The conduct regulations set the minimum standards for recruitment agencies in areas such as fees, terms and conditions, safeguarding of clients' money, advertisements and record keeping, and their main purpose is to protect work seekers and hirers who use the services of recruitment agencies. At this point, however, I would stress that there is a distinction between the conduct regulations and the agency worker regulations, which I know the committee has looked at previously, because the Employment Agency Inspectorate doesn't enforce the agency worker regulations. However, I think we are scheduled to present evidence to the committee on the agency worker regulations in a couple of months' time. Work on the review of the conduct regulations began in January last year with the first of 3 stakeholder meetings, which brought together a range of employment agencies and businesses, representatives of workers and hirers and other industry bodies. The purpose of these meetings was to identify the specific regulations which afforded meaningful protections for work seekers and hirers, and to examine whether there were any unnecessary burdens which could be removed. I think it's worth pointing out at this point that in Great Britain, our counterpart department has carried out an initial consultation on their equivalent regulations, and our understanding is that they're planning a significant revision to their regulations. I would, however, stress that while the GB review was in the background of our particular consultation with, or pre-consultation with stakeholders, it's only there as a background. The Minister has stated categorically that he wants to find, through this pilot, Northern Ireland-based solutions. So we were taking actually a very different tack to what's happening in GB. There were a number of points from stakeholders on which there was general consensus. There was no strong appetite for major change to how the private recruitment sector is regulated. The Employment Agency Inspectorate serves an important and cost-effective function in settling potential breaches of the regulations without the need to resort to an industrial tribunal. Rather than wholly remove the regulations or maintain the status quo, it was preferable to revise them so that they better meet the needs of workers, hirers and agencies, and to take account of developments in private recruitment, including new business models as well as emerging technology. And finally, that guidance could also be simplified with bespoke summary guidance for certain sectors. A range of proposals have been developed on the basis of the discussions with our stakeholders, and these are set out in the draft consultation document which members would have received already. The reality is that responses to this consultation are unlikely to extend much beyond the key stakeholders within the recruitment sector, as well as employer bodies as well. And I'll now pass you over to Deirdre, who will briefly cover the main proposals which are in the consultation.
Okay, thanks, Conor. The proposals relate to regulations under 2 main headings: those concerning an agency's relationship with a work seeker, and those which relate to an agency's relationship with a hirer. Proposals relating to workers fall into 2 main areas, and those are streamlining procedures and reducing administrative burdens on agencies, and providing extra protections for workers. There are separate proposals relating to workers in the entertainment sector, including a potential ban on the charging of publication fees.
With regard to agencies' relationships with hirers, the proposals include improved procedures and increasing the content of the business terms between agencies and hirers in order to reduce subsequent per-assignment administrative requirements. Other miscellaneous proposals include improving clarity in respect of an agency demonstrating its authority to hire and advertise on behalf of a hirer, revising procedures in respect of agencies offering additional services aside from their work-finding service, and clarifying transfer fees where a hirer or another employer employs a worker directly from an agency. We are also proposing improved clarity on the level of information that an agency is required to gather about a position to be filled and the standards around confidentiality of information. In addition to all of this, we are proposing to merge regulations where a single policy issue or procedure is spread across several different regulations, and we would like to improve guidance and templates to support agencies, workers and hirers. So, in summary, in broad terms, the consultation recommends that private recruitment sector regulation in Northern Ireland should be retained but improved in line with the proposals in this consultation, and that the conduct regulations and the proposed amendments should be consolidated into a single set. This would involve revoking the existing 2005 regulations and the 2008 and 2010 amendments, but would result in a single set of more easily understood regulations. We'll now be happy to take any questions that the committee have.
Okay, thanks, Conor. Thanks, Deirdre. I suppose just a couple of points. Really, when reviews start of legislation, have you any concern that you'll end up adding to legislation and regulation rather than removing some, or do you see opportunity already for removals?
I would emphasise and actually hazard against conflating deregulation and better regulation. We're not in the business of deregulating for the sake of deregulating. What we are in the business under this review is looking at regulation and making it more fit for purpose. Now, part of that will ensure that where possible, and I think this is this consultation is the perfect example of it, is looking at the operational outcomes of legislation, which I think while we may have developed legislation with the best intentions in the past, there are sometimes perverse incentives or unseen knock-on effects from legislation. What we're now doing is working with the practitioners to see what those knock-on effects are and addressing the legislation specifically to remove them. So there will absolutely, and this consultation demonstrates that, be areas where we will be removing regulations, but only where it's appropriate. I mean, the overarching theme of the entire employment law review is to remove regulations, but not at the expense of removing rights for workers.
I suppose just in regard to that then, Conor, the gang masters legislation has just, I think, come into effect in Northern Ireland through negative resolution, or will shortly come into effect. Is that going to affect how agencies work, or can that affect how agencies work? Because I know you were speaking, about the hire having to advertise who they're actually hiring agency staff for. Does that come into play here?
The Gangmasters legislation has been in place since 2004. As I understand it, what is coming into place is an amendment to it. And I'm not sure, to be honest, what's in that amendment. But we pick up, the Employment Agency Inspectorate in Dell picks up any sectors which Gangmasters don't deal with. So in that way, we will be operating in sectors that are perhaps released, which I think is what is happening with Gangmasters, released from the Gangmasters legislation.
What's the difference? And there's maybe just difference between a gang master and an agency in some cases? Or in any case?
In some respects, absolutely nothing. The Gangmaster Licensing Authority looks after very specific sectors. It emerged from the back of the Morecambe shellfishing disaster. They look after whether it's food manufacturing, that kind of the general agri-food sectors. They look after those agencies who operate in very sector-specific areas, but they're still employment agencies and employment businesses, according to the definition of the legislation. Gangmasters is really just a term to define what falls under the legislation which governs the work of the Gangmasters Licensing Authority. So in practical terms, there's no real difference. The difference in how they're regulated is that the Gangmasters Licensing Authority issue a licence to enable the employment agencies, employment businesses to operate, whereas we don't. We carry out a range of inspections and complaint investigations.
Okay. Sorry, just I suppose Jerry mentioned that entertainment would be separate or different. How, or what's the rationale behind that?
Arrangements in the entertainment sector are a little bit different because of the way work seekers are recruited there. Generally, employment agencies introduce workers into the entertainment sector, and the actors, for example, will generally be represented by an agent and are identifiable with an agent. So around the entertainment sector, one of the proposals that we've got is to introduce exclusivity for actors in the entertainment sector so that they only have one agent, and that, it has been suggested to us, is safer for those workers because production companies looking for actors will know who to go to find that particular person, and agents in that sector can negotiate more lucrative terms. They can make sure that expenses are paid, that everything is in place for the actor to have good terms and conditions of work, including pay. Whereas if they were without an agent, or if they had a few agents, then it would be less clear to the production company who to go to, and they might approach the actor direct. One of the other things that we're doing in the entertainment sector is, or proposing to do in the entertainment sector, is to abolish publication fees. Typically, an actor or somebody in the entertainment sector other than a model, if they sign up with an agent, then that agent may seek to put their photograph, for example, in a publication, and the most well-known of which is Spotlight. Spotlight isn't produced or published in Northern Ireland, and as far as we know, there are no publications of that nature in Northern Ireland. It's been suggested to us that publication fees aren't actually used in Northern Ireland, and in 2010 we got rid of upfront fees for models, and the modelling sector have told us that that has raised the standard of across the agencies, across the modelling sector, because it's absolutely clear that no upfront fees are permitted. So we are proposing that be brought across the whole entertainment sector, so that those workers are protected in the same way as models.
Okay. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. I'd noticed that the employment law, whenever this process is over, it's maybe just not going to marry that which is already in GB. Now, do you see that creating a problem for construction companies that are working here and equally are working across the water as well in England or some of these other places, and they're employing folk here and they're employing folk there? Do you see that creating a problem for them, where you have two different types of legislation, one here and one there, which is different?
We really don't envisage it being too much of a problem. What we're looking at is how the various companies are regulated. Now, in GB, they're really stripping back their regulation to bare bones. What we've been told quite clearly from the recruitment sector, the people who we actually regulate, is they're quite happy with how they're being regulated at the moment. They don't want a removal of regulation, because what the existence of the Employment Agency Inspectorate actually creates is a level playing field, and that's all the recruitment sector are really looking for. Where there are differences in jurisdictional legislation, we don't think that the requirements of the conduct regulations are going to be significantly onerous on agencies who are operating on a UK-wide basis. As I say, we're trying to bring this forward on a better regulation basis to make it not necessarily easier for agencies and businesses to operate, but to remove those unnecessary businesses and ultimately to provide those protections in place. And I think ensuring that the protections in place should be the driving force behind the consultation in a way that isn't happening in GB. So I suppose that's looking at what our priority should be.
Yes, my question was on the same line, and I think you had mentioned about the different approaches in different jurisdictions. Where does this whole legislation or the proposals for the agencies workers fit in with European legislation?
In relation to the conduct regulations, not at all. These are developed exclusively on a Northern Ireland basis. The agency worker regulations, which are a separate set of regulations which relate to agency workers, do emanate from the Agency Workers Directive, but as I say, they're not related to this very specific set of regulations. The main difference between these is the conduct regulations are enforced by our inspectorate. The agency worker regulations are enforced by the individuals themselves through the tribunal system. As I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be providing separate evidence on the agency worker regulations and some work we've been carrying out over the past year on that to the committee in the next month or so. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members. Okay, folks, thank you very much. We look forward to able to do that. Right, thank you. Members, moving on then, any other business?
Chair, can I have just a couple of points been raised? The first thing, did I read somewhere that we were going to send a letter congratulating, was it Aidan from Queen's University? You're going to do that then? Okay, that's good. The other thing, I saw this article in the paper this morning, 50 jobs in 50 days, and I haven't read it totally, just glanced through it. But I thought there was a good initiative by Belfast Telegraph. And I know according to this here, they're working with Dell about trying to get 50 jobs for young people in 50 days. So it might be an idea just to send them to a wee note from ourselves that we appreciate this sort of initiative, and the more encouraging this is positive news in that sense.
Members, can we do that? Okay. Thanks. I was wondering why you were sitting reading the paper at one stage. I thought it's the horses. Okay, members, content with that. Any other business? Members, if not, the date and time and place of next meeting. The next meeting there will be no committee meeting next week. Our next meeting will take place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 26th of March, room 29, Parliament Buildings. Members, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.